That glass of wine you pour after work, or the beer you crack open once dinner's on, you've probably heard it's fine, even good for you, in the right amount. So why did the people who study this quietly stop saying that? For decades, it felt like settled wisdom. A drink a day was the sensible middle ground. Not the reckless binge, not total abstinence. Just a small, civilized ritual that supposedly did your heart a favor. The image was everywhere, a wine glass beside a plate of dinner. The word moderation on a magazine cover. A doctor gently suggesting a nightly glass wouldn't hurt and might even help. So most of us tucked it away as one of those comfortable facts. A little is fine. And then, without much fanfare, the health authorities who track exactly this kind of thing started walking the whole idea back. Not with a scare campaign, with a quiet, careful reclassification. What that daily glass actually does once it's inside you turns out to be a very different story from the one on the magazine cover. And it starts the moment you swallow. That comfortable belief didn't come from nowhere. For decades, the message was almost cozy. A glass of red wine with dinner wasn't just allowed, it was practically good for you. Doctors said it, headlines repeated it, and it settled in like common sense. The idea had a real seed. Researchers noticed that people in some wine-drinking regions seemed to have surprisingly healthy hearts. So a tidy story formed. Maybe it was the wine doing the protecting. It was neat, it was hopeful, and it spread fast. But a story like that has a quiet flaw. The people sipping a nightly glass of wine also tended to be wealthier, more active, better fed, and less likely to smoke. The wine got the credit that really belonged to the whole comfortable life around it. Untangling that is hard. When healthier people happen to be the ones drinking, the numbers can make a habit look protective even when it isn't. It took stronger, more careful studies to start pulling those two things apart. And when researchers finally looked at what alcohol itself does inside the body, setting the pleasant lifestyle aside, the picture that came back wasn't the friendly one from the dinner table headlines. It was something else entirely. So if the cheerful headlines about a nightly glass turned out to be shakier than they sounded, the obvious question is what the careful researchers actually decided once they looked closely. And the answer landed in a place nobody expected. The World Health Organization runs a specialist body whose entire job is to sort substances by how sure we are that they cause cancer in people. They call it the International Agency for Research on Cancer, and they sort things into groups. The top group is reserved for the substances where the evidence is no longer in doubt. Not maybe, not probably. Proven to cause cancer in humans. It is a short, serious list. In that very top tier sits tobacco smoke. Asbestos. The kinds of things you have been warned about your whole life. And sitting right there beside them, in the same top group, is alcohol itself. Not one particular drink, not the cheap stuff versus the good stuff. The agency put the alcohol, the actual ingredient, inside every beer, wine, and spirit, in the same proven category as the smoke from a cigarette. That is a jarring thing to line up next to a friendly dinner glass. And it raises the real question, the one the classification alone does not answer. How, exactly, does the drink in your hand do that once it is inside you? Once you know it shares a shelf with tobacco, the obvious question is where the safe line sits. How much is fine? A glass? Half a glass? We assume there's a number below which nothing bad happens. In early 2023, the World Health Organization answered that question plainly. There is no safe level of alcohol for our health. Not a low line. No line at all. And that phrasing trips people up, because it isn't how we usually think about risk. We tend to picture a cliff edge. Stay behind the fence and you're perfectly fine. Step over and you fall. So we hunt for the fence, the one drink that's still on the safe side of the line. But the health agency isn't describing a cliff. It's describing a ramp. From the very first sip, the risk starts climbing. Small at the bottom, steeper as you go, with no flat stretch at the start where the ramp lies level. So no safe level doesn't mean one glass will surely harm you. It means there's no magic amount that carries zero cost. The floor of the ramp still tilts. To understand why, you have to follow the drink down into the one organ that has to deal with it. So if there's no line to stay safely under, the natural question is what the drink actually does once it's inside you. And to follow it, you have to follow where it goes first. Down the throat, into the stomach, then somewhere it can't just pass through. Most of what you eat gets broken up in the gut and quietly ferried off. Alcohol is different. It's a small, slippery molecule, and it slides straight through the walls of your stomach and gut into the bloodstream almost as soon as it lands. Now, it's in the blood, and the blood goes everywhere, which is exactly the problem the body wakes up to, because your bloodstream is on a loop, and every loop runs through one central checkpoint whose entire job is cleaning the traffic. That checkpoint is your liver. Picture a large, dense organ tucked under your ribs on the right side, doing hundreds of jobs at once, filtering, sorting, breaking things down. It's the body's chemical processing plant, running quietly, whether you notice it or not. Here's the thing about alcohol. Your body has no real use for it. It's not fuel it wants to keep, and it can't just leave it drifting around in the blood. So it has to be taken apart, and that taking apart falls almost entirely on the liver. Roughly 9 out of every 10 sips end up handled right here, in this one organ. Your lungs and skin breathe off a little, which is what a breathalyzer catches. But the real work, the actual dismantling, happens in the liver. So that's where we go next. So the drink lands in the one place built to deal with it. But here's the thing about how the liver handles alcohol. It does not just make it vanish. It takes it apart piece by piece in stages. Think of it like a two-step disassembly line. The liver grabs the alcohol and changes it into something else first, before it can finish the job. That in-between something is where the trouble hides. Because when the liver breaks alcohol down, the first thing it becomes is not harmless. It becomes a toxic middle step leftover. Scientists have a name for it: acetaldehyde. Say it once and you can forget it. What matters is what it does. Here is the strange part. The alcohol you drank is fairly mild. The leftover the liver makes on the way to clearing it is far more toxic than the drink itself. Your body created something nastier than what went in. And this same toxic leftover is not some obscure chemical nobody worries about. The World Health Organization's Cancer Research Agency lists it as a known cause of cancer, the very thing your liver briefly manufactures to get rid of your drink. So for the short window before the liver finishes the job, that harmful leftover is loose inside your cells. Mild drink in, toxic middle step made, and now it has to be dealt with, which raises the obvious question. What exactly can it touch while it is there? And that toxic leftover doesn't just sit there being unpleasant. While it's floating around, waiting to be cleaned up, it bumps into the most important thing your cells own: the instruction code that tells each one how to copy itself. Think of that code as a blueprint. Every cell in your body carries a full copy, and whenever a cell divides, it photocopies that blueprint and hands one to each new cell. As long as the copy comes out clean, everything downstream stays fine. But the toxic leftover from your drink is sticky. When it drifts past that blueprint, it can latch onto it and put a tiny nick in the lines, like a smudge dragged across one instruction on the page. One smudge on a blueprint isn't a disaster on its own. The trouble starts if that cell decides to divide before anyone notices. Now the photocopier runs, and it copies the smudge right along with everything else. And once the flaw is baked into the copy, it becomes part of the new cell's own blueprint. It gets handed down again and again, each generation of cells carrying a mistake that started as a single smudge from a single toxic molecule. This is why scientists call the drinks toxic leftover a carcinogen, a substance that can trigger cancer. The International Agency for Research on Cancer puts it plainly: this stuff can damage the very code that keeps your cells behaving. Now, if that toxic leftover could nick the blueprint inside your cells, you might expect it to just sit there, doing damage forever. But that is not how your body works. It has a cleanup crew, and it is very good at its job. The liver does not stop halfway. It takes that harmful middle step leftover and breaks it down a second time into something harmless the body can simply pass out. The toxin does not linger. Given time, it clears. And those tiny nicks in the cell's blueprint, your cells are built to fix them. They have repair tools that patch the code, recopy the damaged line correctly, and set things right. Most of the time, the mistake never sticks. So this is not a story about poison pooling inside you, permanent and untouched. One drink, on its own, is a wave the body meets and clears. The toxin comes, the liver finishes it, the cells mend. Order is restored. The harm then is not the leftover itself sitting around. It is the window, the short stretch of time between when the toxin appears and when it is fully cleared. while the blueprint is exposed and the repair crew is still working. For a single drink, that window opens, then closes. No lasting trace, which raises the obvious question. If the body handles one drink so cleanly, what could possibly be wrong with having one every single day? So if the liver finishes the job and the nicks get patched, where's the harm? The catch is timing. That whole cleanup takes hours. And most of us don't wait years between drinks. We wait about a day. Picture the repair crew inside your cells finally caught up, the toxin cleared, everything settling back to normal. And then the next evening's glass arrives, and the whole process starts over from the top. A single drink is a window of stress that opens and then closes. Manageable. Survivable. Your body is built for exactly that. The trouble isn't one open window. It's that you keep reopening it before it's fully shut. Think of it as a race between two speeds. On one side, the pace your cells can repair the damage. On the other, the pace you keep supplying fresh toxin. A drink a day tilts that race, just slightly toward the toxin. It isn't dramatic. No single evening tips anything over. But repair that runs a hair behind, night after night, month after month, is a small deficit that never quite balances back to zero. That's the quiet twist in the whole story. The danger of the daily drink was never really about strength. It was about frequency. A one-off, your body shrugs off, becomes, on repeat, a stress it's always cleaning up after. So the liver keeps taking that hit day after day, and it does what any overworked organ does. It starts cutting corners. And the first corner it cuts shows up as something you would never feel: fat. While the liver is busy breaking down the drink, it puts its normal chores on hold. Handling fat is one of those chores. So instead of moving fat along, the liver leaves it parked inside its own cells. A little of that is no drama. The liver can clear it out on a quiet stretch, but when the drink comes every evening, the quiet stretch never really arrives, and the fat keeps stacking up faster than it leaves. A fatty liver still works. That is the sneaky part. You can carry one for years and feel completely normal, because the liver rarely complains until it is truly struggling. Push it long enough though, and the damage stops being just fat. The liver starts patching its worn spots with tough, stiff tissue, the same way skin lays down a scar over a wound that keeps reopening. And scar tissue does not do the liver's job. It just fills space. Bit by bit, the working part shrinks and the stiff part spreads, and organs slowly wearing down under a workload that never lets up. But the liver never keeps that toxic left over to itself. It hands finished blood back into the bloodstream, and before the alcohol is fully broken down, some of it circulates right past the liver first. So the drink you swallowed does not stay in one place. The alcohol rides the blood to nearly every corner of the body, and wherever it goes, that same toxic leftover can form on the spot. That is why the harm was never just a liver story. The International Agency for Research on Cancer ties alcohol causally to cancers of the breast, the colon and rectum, the mouth, the throat, and the food pipe. Each of those tissues is just more cells, each carrying the same delicate copied instructions. And a toxin that can nick those instructions does not care whether it is passing through the liver or the lining of the gut. It travels, it forms, it nicks whatever cells it reaches. The breast tissue sees it. The colon sees it. The soft lining of the throat sees it on the way down. So when people picture alcohol as a problem only for heavy drinkers wrecking one organ, they have the map wrong. The exposure is body-wide, because the thing doing the damage flows body-wide. So if this toxic leftover rides through the whole body, you might jump to the scariest reading, that a single glass is quietly poisoning you. But that is not what the science actually says, and the gap matters. When the World Health Organization says no level is safe, people hear a threat switch. Below the line, fine. Above it, danger. As if there were a bright edge somewhere, and one glass sits safely under it. But there is no line. What the researchers mean is simpler and stranger. The risk does not click on at some threshold. It climbs steadily, from the very first drink upward, a slope rather than a step. At one drink a day, you are standing near the very bottom of that slope. The extra risk is real, but it is small. Small is not zero, and that is the honest shape of it. Pour a second glass, then a third, and you climb the slope faster. More drinks means more of the toxic leftover, more often, and the risk rises with it. The dose is the whole story. So this was never a claim that one glass guarantees harm. It is a trade, quietly priced. A small added risk in exchange for the drink you enjoy. Knowing the real shape of that trade is the point. So if even the science paints the daily glass as a trade rather than a treat, where did the warm glow around it come from? A surprising amount of it was never medicine at all. It was image. For decades, the daily drink was sold to us as sophistication in a bottle. The candle at dinner, the friend unwinding after work, the vineyard at golden hour. Warm, human, aspirational scenes carefully built to make a drink feel like part of a good life. And when the headlines arrived, saying a glass a day might be good for the heart, that image found a scientific costume to wear. The pleasant feeling and the hopeful study reinforced each other, and the drink started to look almost healthy. But an image is not a mechanism. The candle it's seen tells you nothing about what happens inside the liver. And the science we have walked through does not describe a health food. It describes something the World Health Organization places in its top tier of proven cancer-causing agents. None of that means the pleasure was fake. The dinner really was nice. What quietly fell apart was the halo around it. The idea that the drink itself was doing something good for you. The comfort was real. The health claim was mostly decoration. So strip away the warm image around the glass, and what is left is simpler than the marketing ever suggested. Not a villain, not a health tonic either. Just a drink your liver has to quietly take apart. Every single time. And now the whole chain sits in one clear line. The drink goes down. The liver breaks it into that toxic leftover on the way. For a short window, it can nick the blueprint inside your cells, and then it clears. One drink opens that window once, and your body mostly closes it. The reason a daily habit matters is only that it reopens the same window before the last one has fully healed. Amount is the whole story. That is why the world's cancer researchers say there is no safe line to point to, not because one glass dooms you, but because the risk starts small and simply climbs with every refill. Clarity, not a verdict. So the next time you pour that after-work glass, you are not holding poison or medicine. You are holding a small task, you are handing your liver, and now you understand exactly what it does with it. If there is something you walk past every day and quietly wonder about, a price, a habit, a rule nobody explains, tell me in the comments. Everyone has one of these questions. Subscribe, and the next answer will find you.